I just finished reading The Pastor by Hanne Ørstavik, um, and I have some thoughts. This book was very sad. It's pretty sad at the start. It gets very sad in the middle, and then it ends on a sad note. But it's masterfully written, and very sad, but I think enjoyable because of the quality of the writing. So our main character is a woman named Liv. She is a pastor, as the title of the book may suggest. Um, she's from Norway. She went to college in Germany, and actually originally was not going to become a pastor, but she at some point had a moment where she decided to change her major to theology, and then she ends up not finishing that program and taking a job as a pastor back in Norway. But the part of Norway where she ends up working as a pastor is the far north. There's a part of Norway that wraps all the way around northern Sweden and northern Finland, and actually has a small border with Russia. Um, so that's where she is. It's actually mentioned a couple times in the book that like you can get Russian radio stations on your car in this part of Norway. Um, but yeah, so she's in this tiny village in the far north of Norway. She's the pastor. She's trying to learn what her role in the community is as the pastor. She's trying to learn how to connect to these people, and that's a recurring idea in this book. All of the characters in this book are like emotionally distant from each other, and they're trying to close this distance. Um, and they're, for the most part, not succeeding in closing the distance. They remain very disconnected from each other, even though they're all seemingly trying to grasp some sort of human connection, and they're just not quite getting it. Everybody's like isolated. And she's geographically isolated in this village. The name of the village is never mentioned. I think it's like a fictional village. The village is like partially on an island just outside of a fjord, and then part of the village is like lining the fjord. And then it is mentioned that there's a town like a couple hours away, like 5 hours away by car, that Liv goes to for like a meeting of theologians and pastors. Um, and in that town, there was a rebellion, an uprising of the Sami people in 1852. That is a real thing that happened. So this town, 5 hours away from the fictional setting of the book, is called, and the name is never said in the book, but I looked it up. It's called Kautokeno. Um, so this is a real historical event. There was an uprising in 1852. Some of the local Sami people attacked some like local officials of the Norwegian settlers. So if you're not familiar, the Sami people are like they're sort of related to Finns, and like their language is in the same branch of the same language family that Finnish is in. But they have like a distinct culture. They're indigenous to like the far north of Norway where this book takes place, also a little bit of northern Sweden, northern Finland, and a little bit of Russia, mainly around the Kola Peninsula, which kind of is that little bit. It looks like it's sticking out of the northeastern, right? Yeah, corner of Finland, but it's actually part of Russia. So there's some Sami people in Russia, mainly around that peninsula, I believe. Um, so yeah, this was a historical uprising that takes place, and Liv is kind of writing a research project about this historical event that she's going to present at this like conference seminar thing. So that's one of the things that's going on. She's also just trying to learn her place in the community, and learn how to connect to people as a pastor. She's also processing the death of her best friend back in Germany. Um, and then there's also some tragic events that take place in the town. Um, like the timeline of the book is like the present day timeline is she's been the pastor of this town for about a year. At the very start of the book, some events are mentioned from when she first becomes the pastor, like her first sermon and how it doesn't go well. But for the most part, the present day timeline is about a year in to her being the pastor in this town. but we're getting flashbacks to her time in Germany, um, being with her friend who has passed away and whose death she's kind of processing. Um, I really liked how fluidly we move between those two things, and it really Hanne Ørstavik is really good at putting you into the head of this character. She's also really good at immersing you in the setting, but I felt really immersed in this character's head, and the way that we jump between the two timelines, it feels very natural and feels like how you think about events from your past while you're navigating events from your present. It was very natural. It flowed really well. I felt like I was really in this story. Um, so yeah, I think those are the qualities of the writing that I found very engaging and that made this an enjoyable read despite the very sad subject matter. I'm not going to go into a ton of details on the plot, not necessarily because I'm avoiding spoilers, but just because um, some of the events in here are things that I think the algorithm might kill the video. Um, Last time I reviewed a book that had some of these plot elements, I think the video got like 3 views, which like I'm a very small channel, but I usually end up with like a couple hundred views after a few months. I I think it was The River by Laura Vinogradova. I read that and reviewed it back in August, and I think it's still like single digit views because of some of the things that happen in that book. So I'm not going to mention too many details. I mean, you can probably imagine what I'm hinting at. Um, but I do recommend the book. It's pretty quick. It's, like 270 pages, but it's from Archipelago, and they have this little, it's like a square shape. It's pretty small, and there are bigger sizes of the Archipelago books, like still this shape, but just scaled up a bit. But this is one of their smaller ones, and the font's pretty, well, not big, but it's not small either. So 270 pages, but I mean the word count's probably a little less than you would normally expect. Like it's probably the word count of what would be like 200 pages in a more typical format. Um, so it's pretty quick. I started this while I was on vacation. Didn't read it a whole lot the first few days getting back from vacation, and then I just finished like the second half of the book over the last like 2 days, basically. Um, but yeah, I think there's two or three other books by this author that are available in English. I'll probably be checking them out. I think they are also pretty sad. I think one of them is about I think one of them is about her processing her husband's death in real life. And it's like auto fiction maybe. And I think that's one of her more popular works. Funny story about why I have this book. So, my favorite band is the Mountain Goats, and the singer and songwriter of the Mountain Goats, John Darnielle, he is a big reader. Um, and he appears on a lot of like book related podcasts, which is actually part of what kind of got me back into reading post college, because it's like in college I didn't do a lot of reading for fun, right? I was reading a lot of Russian literature related to my degree, and then I was reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson. It's my favorite fantasy series. I was reading that for fun on and off throughout college. But other than that series, I didn't do a lot of reading for fun. And when I wasn't being assigned the Russian literature for my classes anymore, I wasn't reading a lot of like literary fiction type stuff. And kind of what got me back into it was I was listening to a ton of the Mountain Goats, and I was like, I just need to hear more of John Darnielle's brain. I'm gonna look up every podcast he's ever been a guest on, and a lot of them were like book related podcasts. And I would listen to him talk about these books, and then I would go buy the books. This one, I don't think he discussed it on a podcast, but he posted about it on his Goodreads. He's pretty active on there, and he gave it a really positive review on his Goodreads. And I remember seeing that review, and then the next day I was at a used bookstore and I saw this on the shelf, and it's like a fairly obscure book, so it just felt like destiny to find it right after I read his review. Um, and then it sat on my shelf for like 2 or 3 years. I think I may have gone through this whole story in my video listing all the books I was bringing on my vacation, but there it is again. So yeah, that's why I have this book, and I'm glad I finally read it. And I think that's it. Yeah, again, not gonna get into a lot of the plot details, but I really liked how Hannah Ørstavik puts you in her character's head, and puts you in the setting. She does that really well, and I really enjoyed that.